Everyone, we are here with composer Jason Graves, and he just finished the Dark Pictures, The Devil in Me. The just finished season one. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, Norm. How are you doing? I like your shirt.
Oh, thanks. Send you one if you want it. Um, can you
Cool.
can you tell us about the project? This follows. This is an H. Holmes thing, which already had me. And can you give us a little bit about the game?
So this is the fourth game in the Dark Pictures anthology, and it sort of wraps up. I guess they call it. Did they call it season one? Is that what they said it was?
Yeah, they were saying that
Yeah,
season one concluded. So
there you go.
So this is sort of like the last thing in this season, and I've been working on all four of these games for about 4.5 or 5 years now, and it's just so much fun because every game is obviously scary, but every game has that same kind of cinematic, almost like you're watching just a very extended interactive horror film for 6 or 8 hours. This one in particular is based on, like you said, H. Holmes, who is a real person, a very terrible person, who built this hotel and trapped a lot of people and did all these really crazy things. But he's kind of, I think, the first documented serial killer in America, like late 1800s. So in the game, it kind of takes all of that and puts it into present day. So you've got someone who has kind of recreated this crazy murder castle thing that H. Holmes built in the late 1800s. He's recreated it modern times, and a film crew goes out to film it because they're doing, like, maybe it's a true crime like film crew kind of thing. So they go out there, and of course things turn out to not be what they expect. Instead of documenting things, they're running for their lives, and depending on how well you play and the choices you make, everyone either does or does not get out alive.
so as the player of this game, who are you?
That's what the great thing about the Dark Pictures is. You play every single one of these five different characters in the film crew.
So you've got
So
it's
you've
just
got,
like
it's
a
just like
regular
a
film
regular
crew. You've
film
got a
crew. You've got a
director, you've got
director, you've
someone
got
on
someone on
camera who's like
camera
the
who's like the
talent,
talent,
you've got someone
you've
that
got
does
someone that
lighting,
does
you've got
lighting,
someone
you've
that
got
does
someone that does
sound, you've got
sound,
someone
you've
that
got
like
someone
sets
that
up
like
all the
sets up all
stuff.
the
That's
stuff.
the five
That's the
people.
five people, and you get to play each one of them at different points in time in the game. And I think one of my favorite parts of the game is you're playing the girl that does the sound, and she's got her headphones on and she's got a shotgun mic, and the instructions are follow the sound of the girl in the walls. And you're walking around with your shotgun mic, and it's sort of, and you walk down the hall, and and it's dark, of course. You can't see anything. It's so great.
It sounds so amazing. I may have to go ahead and play it. Um, well, okay, so H. Holmes, as you mentioned before, is the first documented American serial killer, and he had his big murder castle. It was 3 stories. It was in Chicago. Um, you know, anybody that has a minute, Google this guy because he was intense. So Jason, what was your first musical impulse when H. Holmes came to mind?
That's a great question. Because I didn't necessarily think about anything specific. I knew a long time ago that it was going to be based on H. Holmes, but that's kind of all I knew. And the thing is, if I don't know maybe the time setting, or if it's inspired by, or if it is H. Holmes, is it modern? Is it more historical? My daughter is a huge true crime nut. So as soon as I told her that the next one, a year and a half ago, the next one's going to be on H. Holmes, she just spewed all this information at me, and I was learning a lot about him. But it was when I had my first talk with Barney. Barney Pratt is the audio director at Supermassive, and I've been working for him for at least 10 years now. We've been working together. So Supermassive, and Barney especially, had already tried to figure out some ways to use, like, classical and more specifically opera music in the game as diegetic music, meaning it's music that is actually taking place in the game. So a lot of times, Dumet is one of the characters in the game. He has an old phonograph, not photograph, an old record player, and he'll play opera from this like vinyl. So it's got all the crunchy vinyl sounds and he plays it through speakers and things. So I was trying to think, what can the music do that will complement like classical opera or very sort of lyrical, sophisticated sounding string quartets? Because the idea was that our killer is a bit of a showman, and he likes to put on an act and have this very dramatic opera singer, while he's slowly stalking you, or you're getting, squished to death or falling into a giant pit of nails or whatever.
Something
Yeah, totally.
hospitable, yes. Yeah. So the score that you had to create was something that had to live in that actual world and be of that space. It wasn't something that was commenting on it. It was more of a prop, as it were.
Yeah, a lot of times, depending, again, this is what's so great about these games, depending on the choices you make, um, sometimes you don't hear my music, but if you if you make the choices that ends up that someone's being killed, my music will come in sort of on top of the opera or the classical string quartet music, and over about a 30-second or 60-second period sort of take over. And instead of hearing classical opera, now you're hearing incredibly torturous, just crazy strings and general horror orchestra kinds of sounds. So it was important to be able to make that transition smoothly so that you didn't take the players out of the game. Usually it was pretty easy though, because I was coming in underneath the sound of someone screaming, or multiple people screaming at each other. So there was a lot of, windows of opportunity to bring that music in and kind of take over.
What are some of the motifs that you played with in The Devil in Me?
There's this one 4-note rising motif that's very simple. It just repeats over and over and over, and that was one of the first things that I came up with for the game, and it's basically Dumet like personified in music, because in the game there's other games where you're running away and you're panicking and someone's chasing you and it's very frenetic. This is not that kind of a game. This is more about the murder castle itself. So it's about the traps and the rooms that you get stuck in, trying to figure out a puzzle to be able to open a lock in time before something explodes or the trap door falls out and you fall into a giant pit of, I like saying pit of nails for some reason, but a giant pit of bad things. Um, so it's more about timing. And even when you see Dumet, he never really chases anyone. He just sort of walks like at this regular, but he's wearing this real creepy mask and like a bowler hat, and he's got a giant axe or something very foreboding. So it's that in and of itself is scary enough, but I wanted the music to sort of anchor this kind of methodical pace of the killer, but also of the timing. A lot of times when you're trapped in these things and you're trying to get out, usually there's some sort of a clock or a countdown timer or something happening, and you know you only have so much time. So it's all about time going by, which is why I have that bum, 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 bum kind of 4-note rising thing that just keeps playing and playing and playing to kind of go with Dumet.
Grating on your nerves and making you freak out. Now,
Yeah, totally.
the last time we talked, we covered this, but I think it bears repeating that you've composed for TV, film, and video games, but your favorite was video games, right? To work with.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
can you explain why?
Well, I've done a lot more work in video games, to be fair to other composers who may be listening to this. I've got a lot more of a name in games, so I have a lot more creative freedom to do things with people that I've worked with for a long time, or maybe that I've known for a long time and I'm just starting to work with. Where in TV or film, I don't know as many like directors or creative producers in TV or film, so I'm going to have less creative freedom and leeway just from the beginning. But aside from that, I do feel like games always try really hard to do their own thing. They're not looking at, like for Dark Pictures is not looking at whatever the last horror, Resident Evil or something. They're not saying, okay, we need to make sure that we have a scene like that in Resident Evil. We want the music to sound like that music from Resident Evil. They never do that. They're always looking more inward and trying to find unique opportunities to brand their game as something specific and individualistic. And they want the music to do the same thing. I don't get any temp tracks, which is if you were in film or TV, there's always some other music under the scenes beforehand. Maybe it's your own music, maybe it's someone else's music, but there's a natural sort of inclination to have to kind of follow what the temp track has because that's what everybody likes. And I don't get temp tracks in games, which is really nice. As a matter of fact, the more I push and kind of steer away from kind of what would maybe be expected to be the normal kind of music, like in The Devil in Me, I wanted to do this kind of retro noir orchestra, like make it sound kind of old and make it sound kind of antiquated and write the harmonies and things so it's more like from the 50s, kind of throwback 1950s, but then contrast that with these crazy like over the top trailer music, almost like big stingers and electric sounding synthesizers that are very, very scared, jumpy sort of sounds, and then have, live piano and live harp and all these mechanical clicking sounds. And those were all my ideas. And Supermassive just says, great, keep coming up with more ideas, please, which is amazing.
Or creative freedom, and you can break a lot more rules. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Totally. Yeah, it's all about breaking the rules. Honestly, I keep saying when I start on a new project, tell me when I've gone too far off the reservation and this isn't, kind of in the wheelhouse of sounds that you think would work for your project. Ever have a developer say like, oh, okay, that's enough. Come back to reality a little bit. The more I push, the more they love it. And the more it challenges me to write new kinds of things because I'm using new sounds or new instruments all the time.
Awesome. And so can you briefly explain, this is a huge subject, but can you briefly explain the I don't know, the technique for creating a score to something like a video game that there are so many moving parts?
Well, the music, like the way I write music for a game, like a 3-minute cue for a game versus a 3-minute cue for television, the technical making music part is exactly the same. I'm using, guitar and synthesizer and some drums and a piano or whatever. I'm playing some strings. It's how the music gets delivered and sort of the process that I think about when I'm writing the music that's different. Because for TV or film, everything eventually is just a stereo, single, linear cue. So if you listen to that 3-minute cue, either on the soundtrack or watching the film or TV show, it's going to play the exact same way every single time you watch the scene because it's finished, right? The scene's finished. TV or film, very linear. With games, you could play that same cue or play that same part of the game, that same chapter maybe that has that 3-minute cue in it, and you're going to make different decisions in the game. Sometimes even if you do the same thing, something different's going to happen, and the music's going to react to that. The music's going to change. So that's where it comes down to giving options to the developer of the game so that if you turn right instead of left, there's an alternate instrument that plays or an alternate section of music that you hear. It's a lot of times it's more music, which is another reason I love games so much. I think if I had a 2-hour score for a film, that would be a really busy, like wall-to-wall music score. Even a 2-hour film probably has 90 minutes of music, but we can easily go 2 to 3 hours and up on games because it's not a 2-hour film. It's an 6, 8, 10, 12-hour experience. So it needs a lot more music, which is just more fun to do.
And a lot more I don't know, variable pieces to slot in wherever people might end up. Yeah, it just the idea of composing for video games just is absolutely fascinating to me. So you have completed the let's see, The Devil in Me. So what's next?
I think next is Switchback, right? That's coming out in March, I believe, which is another Dark Pictures game, but this time it's for VR.
Okay.
And I've got some new music in that I wrote last year. And it's the game itself is sort of a tour de force of all the Dark Pictures games now that we've wrapped up the first season. So you're in VR, but you're kind of going through these 4 different worlds of the Dark Pictures, as well as new worlds. So the music also pays homage to that, and we've got new music in there as well, which also was just it's always fun to work with those guys because like any relationship, you know each other long enough, you have a shorthand, and you trust each other, and there's a lot in that history that I really appreciate.
Well, uh, you're one lucky guy to have a gig like that. I'm telling you. You know, that's pretty amazing. Well, listen, please come back when Switchback comes out and let's talk all about that. But Jason, absolutely a pleasure to talk to you again. I could go on forever, but we only have a short amount of time. Uh, everyone, The Dark Pictures, The Devil in Me is out. The season 1 is finished, and Jason Graves did the music. Jason, best of luck on this release, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Oh, thanks so much, Norm. It's always a pleasure.